believe in an afterlife. I believe it's anything but chaos. But what if it is? Or what if between here and there, there's something else that hasn't been reported? And the deep fundamental thinkers and questioners sit down and ask ourselves these questions. Not that it matters to most people or even, maybe to anybody other than the thinkers. But there are fundamental questions that may or may not matter. I had a friend of mine, her husband was sick and passed away unexpectedly. We knew he was sick unexpectedly. She took the whole summer off. One of the faculty here, retired since then. And I had heard she wanted to chat with me. Well, that was the summer, and she went to Texas where her son was. She came back, and I walked into her office, and I said, "You doing okay?" And she just burst into tears. She says, "I wish the pain would go away." And I said, "It's never going to go away." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Grief is like an ocean. It comes in, and then it goes back. It comes in, and then it goes back. And some waves are more powerful, and some waves just kind of lap at your feet." I said, "Life is grief. And it's like an ocean. It's never going to go away." I said, "If you don't let grief deal with you, you're going to have a hard time looking into tomorrow and seeing yourself okay." I said, "It's okay." Do you know what I'm talking about? I was watching a movie with Robert Downey Jr., The Judge. That was my dad. I mean, we didn't fall in love with each other till he was 85. I moved down here to take care of him. He and I did not get along. And when I came down here and took care of him, we just grew together. It was just amazing, just amazing. And I watched that movie. I can't watch it. It's one of the fundamental conditions of life that grief goes along with us. You lose someone you love, broken hearts, first love. And we try and avoid it instead of embracing it. And a philosopher will tell you, embrace it. Don't fight it. It's like a riptide. Don't fight it. Everyone's going to have it. It's just part of life. It's okay. When one cries, the other tastes salt. We're in community with one another. I appreciate you answering. Anybody else? What are fundamental truths? What is a fundamental truth? Do you have a fundamental truth? Me ayuda, Pato. When you look at me, I think you're ready, so when you do that, I have to. Hey? Nobody. Bring my nutcracker with me tomorrow. No, you're okay. Okay, let me give you a little more to lecture then. I'll find a rabbit hole pretty soon. From the Western perspective, there's two traditional ways we look at things. I really want to caution you, people will say it's either this or that, either or. We're locked in a world of contradictions. It's either this or that, and then everything that's in the middle is called the gray area. No, it's not. It's called alternative ways of looking at things. There's lots of ways to look at things, not just the extremes of both ends. Sometimes this is a good camp to camp out in, and sometimes this is a good camp to camp out in, and most of the time we're in fluid motion. Most of your ideas and most of the short time you've had on the planet, you have been very fluid in where you're at. And that's life's invitation, not to get caught in the contradiction of the extremes. There are two perspectives in the Western world that are usually used to try and uncover truth. One is called foundationalism, argues that one rationality is universal, objective, and absolute. Foundationalism believes in absolute, irrefutable truth, capital T. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Therefore, this truth is what we call objective. Why would they want to do that? Because we also realize that a fundamental characteristic of a human being is that we carry with us a personal perspective. You cannot get rid of yourself. So the self ends up being a subject to your own point of view. That doesn't mean we can't modify it, we can't look outside of it, but in a way you're condemned to your own self. You can't get rid of yourself. You have a certain perspective. Human beings are hardwired in a certain way. One of the ways is through self-understanding. One of the great revelations we had, I was just watching this on Nat Geo last night, when we put the Hubble telescope out in space and we took care of the bad mirrors that we had put in there, we saw things we didn't even know existed out there. And the reason for that is we're not hardwired to see it. We don't see the blue shift in light, we don't see the red shift in light. So you see some of those incredibly, almost artistic cosmic pictures that we've all seen that NASA posts. We couldn't see that with the human eye. We're not hardwired to do that. What we are hardwired to do, though, is a perspective. And rational thinking will tell us that we need to remove our perspective so that the information that's left over is objective. It's not spoiled by our individual point of view. So foundationalism or foundationalists believe there is absolute truth, and in order to arrive at that, they need to remove our personal perspective so we all agree. That's how we get to absolute. We all agree on what's left over. So the way you see things may not necessarily be the way things naturally are. So up north you see this all the time. I don't know about Florida, but you have what we call these harvest moons. And the moon will come up and it is gigantic and it's orange. It is just huge. And we all see it. We go, wow. In fact, they just had the largest moon at its apex maybe a month ago. I went out and took a look at it. I sat back behind my apartment. It is gigantic. And you wait an hour or so and the moon, look, the moon doesn't rise, but that's how we verbal. So the moon rises. What's happening is we're rotating. And the moon rises and it goes from this big gigantic orange ball to this pretty large yellow ball. And if we wait a little more time and we rotate even more and it rises to what we call its apex or its high point, it becomes a smaller white ball. Oh, wait a minute, it's the moon. I mean, does the moon change color? Does it change size? Like a balloon, you let a little air out as it goes higher and its size changes? Well, no. And it turns out the moon is neither orange nor yellow nor white, it's gray. And the light of the sun reflects off of it and gives us, to the hardwiredness in our eyes, a certain color. The reason it goes through orange and yellow and then back to white is because the atmosphere on the horizon is more dense. It acts like an optical illusion, really. And it acts like a magnifying glass, and it distorts the colors as you get more condensed atmosphere, and then you get higher up in the atmosphere. Look, it's the same atmosphere, but we're looking at it on the horizon. It's just more dense down there. And so we get these color shifts, we get size shifts, and yet we now know it doesn't change color or size. So the objectivist or the foundationalist will say, see, we got to get rid of that perspective. If we could just get rid of that perspective, we'd find the truth. That's the hope of foundationalism. That if we would just get rid of perspective, at some point we could get to fundamental truths, capital T, that don't ever change. We haven't arrived there yet. I understand the principle, but I also understand that you is not going to fade away. And as long as you are you, you will always have built into you, hardwired into you, a certain perspective. And as long as that perspective is there, you become what we call a constructivist. You believe in constructivism. We construct the meaning to reality. It's not like reality changes. We construct a meaning to it based on how we see things. So in some cultures, when you communicate with someone, you need to give them space. And you would say, you know, well, and you go to, I've been in 17 countries in my life, and you get so close to some people, and they'll just slowly back out and make sure that they have their space. You know, we get intimate with one another. We chat with one another, you know. Other cultures don't do that. That's the construct of their space. You go to some cultures after dinner, you better burp. It's a sign of appreciating a meal. And if you don't, whoever cooked the meal could be offended. It's like, didn't you like my meal? Yes. Sure.
But I was born and raised in Miami, and Hispanics all around. Coming here, it was so different. It's not like some people get funny, but it's really like just basic things.
Yeah. And it's all over that way. I've spent time in Ecuador and Chile and Mexico, and it's that way all the time. In fact, we use the phrase amor, which could be a lover, but it's not meant to be that. It's just a phrase. It's like, you know, mi amor, ¿cómo estamos, you know. But that's that culture. That's the way it's constructed. When I go into foreign countries, and this isn't just Hispanic. I spent 2.5 years in Germany too. But in many cultures, if someone has a degree, like I met an architect in Mexico, and when you address them, I mean, I know his first name, but when I address him, it's arquitecto, or doctor, or whatever their title is. It's not like, oh, you have to call me doctor. It's just it's a way of relating to one another. It's how you talk to one another. In many languages, there's a formal and informal sense of communication with one, too. I'm, as an older person, allowed to be very informal. I had a lady from Mexico, from Mexico City, and she had asked me a question in the course, and then she put down, because she said it in Spanish, she says, do you mind if I use the person, the familiar? I didn't care, but she asked. It was very etiquette-driven. So constructivists say that reality, look, it's the same reality. But they say we construct it around our own perspectives, around our own, and I don't say biases or prejudices like it's a negative thing. We all come with certain stuff, and it either makes us feel comfortable. Some people talk with their hands all the time. You know, I make people seasick because I walk back and forth. Other people just stand there the whole lecture and never move. So the constructivists say that the foundationalists are not being honest with themselves, that all reality, many rationalities are local and based on the intersubjective agreement, also called anti-foundationalism, so we get the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now, I talked to my friend, Professor Insulaco, and he said, but you know, beauty is really real. And I say, well, I can't argue with that. It's just I don't know what beauty is. I'm not hardwired to see pure beauty. I can tell beautiful. And someone else will say, well, isn't this beautiful? And I'll look at it and go, no. But to them, it's beautiful. And it's genuine. To them, it's beautiful. So that's the balance. That's the difference between the two. Are there absolute truths out there? Those with an absolute faith say yes. And then on the other side of the equation, there's the constructivists that say, well, prove it to me. Well, I mean, we even come up with not formulas, but proofs, we call them, for the existence of God. Anselm was one of them in the Western world, for the existence of God, you know. And other people sit there skeptical and say, well, that doesn't prove anything to me. Well, that's because maybe your perspective is just different than mine. Does it say there are